Welcome back to Who Cares Anyway? My name is Quentin Walker, and this is a podcast where I give you my sports opinions. And if you agree with me, cool. If you don't agree with me, cool. Either way, who cares anyway? This week's episode, I want to talk a little bit about the NFL draft. Happened last week. Um, and I want to give a shout out to my guy Will, who drop this idea in front of me. Um, you and I will 100% will get a time together, and we'll definitely get you on the pod at some point. That has not I've not forgotten about that. But I'm gonna give a little bit of an outline on how I'm gonna go through this. I'm not gonna do all 32 teams. I don't have that kind of time. That would be way too long. That's 32 teams, 7 rounds. That's a lot. But what I will do is I have 6 teams categorized into three different categories. And for each team, I'm gonna give their grade. I'm gonna give key players that I felt really stood out to me the most when looking through their draft and watching players tape from college and how they fit on the team. And then I'm gonna give a little bit. I'm gonna give my reasoning as to why I gave the teams these grades and why these players stood out to me the most. So before we jump in, for those of you watching on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the video. The usual YouTube things. Uh, and for those of you listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I appreciate you because you're listening to me talk. There's no visual. I'd be bored. Maybe not. I don't know. I am doing a podcast and listening to myself talk, but it is here we are. Again, I appreciate you because you don't have to do that. So let's get right into it. My first category, I'm gonna start with my teams. The teams that I'm a fan of, the teams that I watch every Sun that I try to watch every Sunday during the season, the teams that I focus on the most when gathering news and uh, so on and so forth. You know it, you know what I'm trying to say. Um, I want to start with the New York Jets. I'm a Jets fan through and through. I bleed green. Um, I gave the Jets a low B for this draft. A pretty good grade, it wasn't a bad draft at all by any means. And the players that I saw to be the most eye-catching to me were the two running backs that they drafted, Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. The draft for the Jets kind of started off a little questionable. It made me scratch my head a little bit because they drafted an offensive lineman at number 10, Olu Fashanu from Penn State. Um, and I, I I questioned it because it to me didn't seem like a win now move when you're sitting in the 10th spot and you have the ability to go get guys like Brock Bowers was still available. Um, you also had Layat Blatch who was available surprisingly, and we're gonna touch on that a little bit later. Um, and you also had a couple of receivers that might have been reaches at 10, which is why it's understandable why they didn't draft a receiver at 10. But the pick of Fashanu isn't a win right now. It's a security for the future. They do have two All Pro tackles, I believe All Pro. Could be wrong on that. I have to double check that. Um, but two highly regarded tackles in the NFL in the way of Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith. Now, the problem there is that both of those guys are 30 plus, and in football, when you start to hit that mid 30s, you kind of start to like the wheels start to fall off a little bit. Like the rubber is a little thin. So I can see where they're coming from, but when you're trying to figure out where your window is with Aaron Rodgers, and you have the ability to go get a tight end like Brock Bowers, who will help in the offense and really provide another weapon for Rodgers, why not go grab him? But the rest of the draft, like was really solid. Like I said, they drafted two running backs. They drafted Braylon Allen in the fourth round with pick 134 out of Wisconsin, and they drafted Isaiah Davis in the fifth round with pick 173 from South Dakota State. And to me, outside of the rest of their draft, and I'll lay out the rest of who else they drafted in a little bit here, but to me, these two guys are watching them play and seeing what the Jets are building. They stood out to me the most because of the fact that these are two guys that kind of remind me of Breece Hall a little bit, who they already have on the roster, but they're like these stocky kind of bowling ball looking backs. They're not like they're not necessarily fat, but they're well built, strong lower bodies, and they tend to bounce off of first tacklers often. And both of these guys have big play ability. When after getting up to the second level, getting up to the linebackers, and it's hard to bring them down because of that strong lower body, that low center of gravity. Um, they just don't really. I don't think either of them carry the speed that Breece Hall has, but they're it when looking at them, it's obvious to me that the Jets want downhill runners that are going to wear the defense down over time, and it might be a running back by committee type of thing. They might do that just to keep Breece Hall fresh. He's obviously going to be the lead back. He's obviously going to be the bell cow, but you with his injury history, with the ACL that he's probably fully recovered from at this point, but you don't want to run that risk again. You don't want to run the risk of that happening again. So it to me looks like they're trying to set up their run game to be this bruising run game so that by the time middle of the third quarter rolls around, these guys can just go. It's you're breaking things open, and you're seeing 30, 40, 50-yard runs being broken off because the defense is so tired of tackling these guys. Um, that being said, looking at the rest of their draft, it's not a bad draft. They drafted Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky, receiver out of Western Kentucky, in the third round with pick 65. They drafted Jordan Travis, quarterback from Florida State, with in the fifth round with pick 171. They drafted Quantez Stiggers, a cornerback from the Toronto Argonauts, the Canadian Football League team, who he has no college experience, which was interesting to me. And watching his tape, it didn't look like he needed it. He's a he's a playmaker. He knows what he has this, and I don't want to say innate ability, but he has this ability to be where he needs to be at all times. The ability to be in the right place, right time to make a play. He closes well on the ball. He's aggressive when closing, and it's got to be a story for that guy. And then in the seventh round with pick 257, Mr. Irrelevant, Jalen Key, defensive back from Alabama. Um, and I'm not gonna go in depth on all these guys. But I just want to say that this draft is not a bad draft at all by any means. The Jets went out and grabbed playmakers on both sides of the ball to really shore up and to really shore up their defense, but to also push their offense to the next level. Um, I'm excited to see where they go this year. I'm excited to see a full season of Aaron Rodgers. I'm excited to see what the offense brings to the table this year, and I'm excited to see that defense back on the field. Our defense is one of the best defenses in the league last year, so I'm excited to see a repeat. Moving on to my next team, I have the LA Chargers. I was born in San Diego. San Diego Chargers is, it's there's a connection. There's that San Diego connection. I've always been a Chargers fan since I was little, alongside the Jets. Um, and I gave the Chargers a low A. The reason why, the receivers, the receivers they drafted stood out to me the most. They started out their draft by grabbing the best offensive lineman in the draft in Joe Alt, and I talked about him when I did my mock draft. Touched on I went more in depth on him uh in that, but after getting they went out and grabbed three receivers that have the ability to make impacts immediately. This is a team that just lost their two best receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and you're looking at a receiver room that's, I don't want to say depleted of talent, but they're young, unheralded guys who haven't really proven themselves yet, so it's hard to tell what exactly they have there. So they went out and grabbed guys that uh, can foster competition in their receiver room, and it started with uh, Lad McConkey, wide receiver from Georgia in round two at pick 34, and they went out. It took until the seventh round to get a couple more, the other two receivers, and Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson. Brendan Rice, son of Jerry Rice, receiver from USC, and Cornelius Johnson, receiver from Michigan. Sorry, TTUN. I can't. That no. Anyway, um, these watching the tape on these guys, I talked about McConkey in my mock draft as well. But watching the tape on Rice and Johnson, these are two guys that uh are just game breakers. They're big bodied receivers. Rice is 6'4", um, but they both got speed to them. That ability to take the top off the defense, and you guys that you can, kind of like a Mike Will type of receiver, where you can kind of just throw the ball up to them and they'll go get it. But also they both have the speed and the toughness to make big plays after the catch. They make those catches, and if good luck tackling him if you're the first one in by yourself. Um, the rest of the draft was also really good. Um, Drafted Junior Colson in the third round with pick 69 out of TTUN. The Jim Harbaugh connection is showing through. Um, with a linebacker, I didn't list his position. Round four, I don't want to butcher his name. I believe it's Justin Eboigbe, I believe it's pronounced. Defensive tackle from Alabama with pick 105. Tarheeb Still, corner from Maryland with pick 137. Cam Hart, another corner from Notre Dame with pick 140, and then Kimani Vidal, running back from Troy with pick 181. The draft, like I watched tape on all these guys while I was putting this together, and all of their picks to me scream a team that's gearing up to win now. They got Justin Herbert weapons. He's got a supply of weapons now. I'm not gonna say an endless supply, but he's got a supply of weapons. He's got protection now, and they went out and helped their defense out, which has been the side of the ball that the Chargers have struggled with the most. Because if anyone knows the Chargers, this is a team that for the last 3 years just can't hold on to leads late in games, and it's purely a defensive struggle. Um, so they definitely went and got guys that could help on that defensive side of the ball, help them hold leads, so that they can compete with the Chiefs this year and hopefully win an AFC West title and make a playoff run. But time would tell. But like I said, I think the receivers, I think McConkey, Rice, and Johnson are by far, not by far, but I think to me the most impactful draft picks for them, because that was a position where they really needed help after losing Keenan and Mike Will. And you look at that receiver room and you had no idea what's going on there. It was the biggest question mark on their roster. And I think they did a good job of filling it. So moving on to my next category, I have my head scratchers. These are teams, not necessarily bad drafts, but they made decisions within the draft that made you kind of scratch your head a little bit. Made you kind of question, what are we doing here? To start this category, I have the Atlanta Falcons. I gave the Atlanta Falcons a C, and the key players I pull for the Atlanta Falcons are Mike Penix Jr. and Kirk Cousins. Now, a lot of you are thinking Kirk Cousins didn't get drafted. He's a 13-year veteran. But why would you draft Mike Penix Jr. knowing you just signed Kirk Cousins to a massive deal this offseason to be your starting quarterback for the next 4 years? And granted, Kirk Cousins is coming off an Achilles injury. You don't know what the rehab looks like. You don't know if he'll be the same Kirk Cousins. But it's still questionable. And I mean, I get it. Their front office, I believe it was their GM, came out and said that they felt this was their guy for the future, past Kirk Cousins, and that's why they went and grabbed him at 8 instead of grabbing somebody like Leatu Latu or Dallas Turner, who could have turned their defense around and been defensive playmakers for them. But they felt with what was available and where they were that Mike Penix was the best choice for their future, which is understandable. You don't wanna look back on a draft and feel like you missed on getting a guy that could have been a stalwart in your franchise for years to come, or could have really helped your franchise out. But like I said, it is it is a little iffy when you're looking at it in the here and now. But I digress. after Penix, the Falcons didn't have a terrible draft. Um, they went out and grabbed players that fit their needs. They grabbed a couple of defensive linemen. I believe they also, let me pull this up real quick. Yeah, they grabbed the receiver. I'll read through it. With in the second round, pick 35 was Rook Orororo, defensive tackle from Clemson. The third pick with pick 74 was Braylon Trice. Third round, pick 74 was Braylon Trice, edge rusher from Washington. Uh, in the fourth round, at pick 109, they drafted Brandon Dorlus, defensive end from Oregon. The fifth pick, the fifth round, pick 143, they drafted J.D. Bertrand, linebacker from Notre Dame. In round 6, pick 186, they drafted Jace McClellan, running back from Alabama. Also in that same round, at pick 187, the little next pick, they drafted Casey Washington, wide receiver from Illinois, who, if they didn't draft Mike Penix, he would have been my key player. Watching his tape, he's big, big, lanky receiver who can go up and get the ball. He's tough. He breaks tackles well. He's, for lack of a better phrase, got that dog in him. But it's watching him. It's hard to get him down. He's a possession type of receiver. He's not gonna blow you away with his speed, but he's short-handed. Makes almost every catch I saw thrown to him, and adjusts to the ball well. And then also in the sixth round with pick 197, they drafted Zion Logu. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Um, or is it Logway? I don't know. It's spelled Logue. It'll probably be on the screen somewhere. Defensive lineman from Georgia. Like I said, the draft past Penix wasn't bad. They're definitely not the most flashy guys. Watching tape they're not gonna wow you with the things they do, but they are consistent players and they are impactful players. So that's why I got the C. But Penix does pull it down because without the Penix pick, this is probably a high B, depending on who you replace Penix with. But with the Penix pick, it pulls it down to a C. I guess time will tell, and we'll see if the Falcons' crazy idea was right. And this isn't the first time the Falcons have drafted a left-handed quarterback while while having a 35-year-old veteran on their roster. If you know, you know. Moving on, my next head scratcher is the Dallas Cowboys, and I gotta talk to my Dallas Cowboys fans because I wonder how y'all feel about this draft. Not just this draft, but the re-signing or the reunion, I should say, of Zeke Elliott with the team. To me, it just felt weird that they didn't go out and draft a running back, which is why I kind of hesitated to give them a B. But looking at their draft, it's not a bad draft at all. I give them a B because they drafted guys that fit what the Cowboys do. Um, they went out and grabbed large men to protect Dak Prescott. Um, it started with Tyler Guyton, offensive tackle from Oklahoma, uh, at pick 29. Then it went on to Cooper Beebe, a guard from Kansas State, at pick 73. Then Nathan Thomas from Louisiana Lafayette, offensive tackle from Louisiana Lafayette, at pick 233. Uh, those three offensive linemen are huge. They're maulers. Watching tape, it's just every time I see them blocking somebody, somebody's on the ground. Um, and that's what you need in that Cowboys offense because that's what the Cowboys offense has always been. It's always been the offensive line has always been these big maulers that can move very quickly and will scare the life out of any defensive backer, maybe even linebacker, trying to come downhill to stop a run. Um, but past that, they drafted in round two at pick 56 Marshawn Kneeland, edge rusher from Western Michigan. Uh, at pick 87, it was Maris Liufau, linebacker from Notre Dame. Pick 174 was Kalen Carson, cornerback from Wake Forest. Pick 216 was Ryan Flournoy, wide receiver from Southeast Missouri State. And pick 244 was Justin Rogers, defensive tackle from Auburn. Um, like I said, their draft it's a Cowboys draft. These are all guys that fit what the Cowboys do, and they fit it well. But like I said, my key players, there's no running back here. And I get it, there wasn't a whole lot of running back talent. Let me not say talent, but there wasn't any first round running back talent. Um, I mean, I'm looking at it and it makes me wonder just how much did they scout the running backs in this class? Uh, if they did scout them thoroughly, did they just not fall in love with the running backs to make them want to go and grab a running back? Um, it also makes me question whether or not they already had a, a, a reunion with Zeke in mind going into the draft, and they just didn't want to. That's why they didn't draft a running back because they knew they were gonna go sign Zeke. Um, Also, it makes me wonder if on draft night, if they felt that the running backs available were reaches from their position and they didn't want to trade up or down to go and get a running back. Either way, the decision not to draft a running back for a team that is in desperate need of a bell cow running back is definitely a head scratcher. Tony Pollard obviously wasn't their guy. Letting Zeke walk might have been a mistake, but it could be argued that towards the end of his tenure, his first stint with the Cowboys, he was kind of falling off and wasn't the same running back that he was when he got drafted. But I think that all in all, good draft, and it just didn't make sense to me not to draft a running back if they were available. But who knows their reasoning behind it? Only the Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones do. So moving on to my next category, I have the Homerun Hitters. These are two teams that I felt really knocked the ball out of the park with the drafts and really got some steals in terms of value. Um, and to start this category, I have the Indianapolis Colts. I give the Colts a high A grade. This draft was phenomenal for the Colts, in my opinion. And it started with pick 15 and Leatu Latu. This is a guy that should have been off the board at 7 or 8 or 9. He should have been off the board in the first 10 picks, and he wasn't. He was still around at 15, and the Colts scooped him up, and they got one hell of an edge rusher out of it. Um, the, I talked about him in my mock draft more in depth, but the kid is a specimen. Yes, he has an injury history with the neck injury. He was supposed to be medically unable to play and had to medically retire. But he came back and he had a phenomenal year with UCLA last year, and he's going to make a world of an impact for the Colts defense this year. And don't be surprised if the Colts almost made the playoffs last year despite losing Anthony Richardson to that shoulder injury at the beginning of the year. So don't be surprised if the Colts are contending with the Texans for the AFC South title. I can't talk. AFC South title, and the Colts are pressing to make a playoff run. I would not be surprised, and it might not be this year exact, but it might. Don't be surprised if it happens. But the key players I had for the Colts were Jalen Simpson and Micah Abraham. Um, Jalen Simpson out of Auburn, safety out of Auburn. They picked him at pick 164 in the fifth round. And Micah Abraham, cornerback from Marshall, was picked at pick 201 in round six. Um, Watching these two guys on tape, just aggressive defensive backs, downhill, hard hitters. They both close well on the ball. Jalen Simpson, you're gonna find around the line of scrimmage a lot, I feel, because he's got that aggressiveness to play there. He's gonna help, and he has no problem sticking his nose in there in the run game. Um, but he's also got that ability to play that center fielder role. Not that I think they'll need him to. We'll see what their roster shakes out to be week one after OTAs, training camp, preseason, all of that. But I think that these two guys are 100% like the most impactful players that they drafted outside of Latu in this draft. Um, the rest of the draft goes as such. Tanner, wait. Adonai Mitchell was getting a little ahead of myself. Adonai Mitchell, or is it? I don't know. He pronounces it weird. It's not Adonai. I think it's Adonai. I believe. I could be wrong on that. But either way, I'm gonna call him AD because that's what I've seen him go by. AD Mitchell, wide receiver from Texas, at pick 52. Matt Goncalves, offensive tackle from Pittsburgh, at pick 79. Tanner Bortolini, center from Wisconsin, at pick 117. Anthony Gould, wide receiver from Oregon State, at pick 142. Jalen Carlisle, safety from Missouri, at pick 151. We talked about Jalen Simpson and Micah Abraham. Those are their next two picks. And then they ended their draft with Jonah Lealu, defensive tackle from Oklahoma, at pick 234. Like I said, their draft really rounded out to be a really good one. They got a lot of impact guys, a lot of guys that they grabbed for great value. I didn't think AD Mitchell was going to be around even in the second round. I thought he was a first round receiver. I didn't think he was going to be around in the second round later, let alone towards the end of the second round at that. Um, but he fell to the Colts, and like I said, the Colts got great value on a lot of these guys. The next team I want to touch on that I really think really did a great job at drafting, and this team really tends to have pretty good drafts, and they tend to do it with a lot of value. Like they tend to get guys that fall, and they're not supposed to fall. Uh, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. I give the Pittsburgh Steelers an A for this draft. I think they did a great job at uh getting guys that can really help this team be way better than it was last year. It started with Troy Fautanu, offensive tackle from Washington, at pick 20. Then at pick 51, Zach Frazier, center from West Virginia. Then at pick 84, Roman Wilson, wide receiver from TTUN. Then at pick 98, Peyton Wilson, no relation, linebacker from NC State. Then at pick 119, Mason McCormick, guard from South Dakota State. Then at pick 178, Logan Lee, defensive tackle from Iowa. And at pick 195, to round out their draft, Ryan Watts, corner from Texas. Now, when I look at their draft and I watch their tape, the guys that stood out to me the most, Peyton Wilson, who, if I'm remembering correctly, if I'm remembering my media circuit from college football last year and years prior, I believe the last couple of years, Peyton Wilson was regarded as the best linebacker in college football. Um, and he only slid in the draft due to injuries. Uh, the guy has no ACL, so I understand why that would scare a lot of teams. But he also, I believe, it was a shoulder injury that he dealt with as well, on top of the ACL injuries that he had, on top of the ACL injuries and then subsequent surgery. Um, but despite that, watching his tape, the dude's everywhere. He's all over the field. He's an absolute gamer at linebacker at the Mike linebacker spot. Um, he like it's like reckless abandon watching him go out and tackle. It's fast, hard, and has no care. But he also, it's not just his ability to tackle. He's got sideline to sideline speed. He's got the ability to cover running backs out of the backfield and probably some tight ends as well, which he's going to have to do playing against the Ravens um, and the Browns and Mark Andrews, David Njoku. Um, but I think that uh, they did a great job at drafting a guy that people were kind of skeptical on because of his injury history, but he's still a really good player and will still be really impactful for this team this season, making the Steelers defense a defense to be feared in the AFC, not only the AFC North, but the AFC as a whole. Um, and the other key player I want to touch on, it's a group of players. I listed off three offensive linemen that they drafted, and I think they got great value on all three of them, and all three of them are going to make impacts. Maybe not immediately, but down the line, you're going to hear these names. And it's, offensive linemen, you don't really hear their names called because you're not supposed to. When you don't hear an offensive lineman's name, that means he's doing a good job. But don't be surprised if the Steelers are playing your team and when they're doing their starting lineups on offense, you hear these three guys in that in that group. Um, like I said, it starts with Fautanu. I went more in depth on Fautanu in my mock draft. Coincidentally, had him going at pick 20, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, but Zach Frazier is when I was talking about the Cowboys, I said that the offensive linemen they drafted were maulers. Zach Frazier's a mauler, like through and through, right in the middle of that line. He is gonna open holes up, but he's also gonna command that line with authority, and he's not gonna get pushed back into the lap of whoever is playing quarterback for the Steelers this year, whether it be Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. And then Mason McCormick, uh, we love the FCS love. Um, and this kid, This guy is it's a joy watching him play because I watching him and watching how quickly he gets around on pulls and watching how it's almost like watching a big running back because he's able to get through on pulls quickly, but he comes through that hole hard and fast. So as a linebacker, if I'm a linebacker and I'm going to fill that hole and I see this large man pulling around filling that hole before I can get to it, I don't know that I want to tackle him. I don't know that I want to go shed that block, and that's why I didn't play linebacker. Um, but he's it's a powerhouse on the inside of that line, and he's gonna come around lead block for their running backs for Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, hopefully to have a better run game this year. And is not gonna shy away from any any defensive defensive tackle coming his way. Um, and he's got a couple to contend with in the AFC North that he's got to do a great job of keeping at bay. And Myles Garrett, Justin Matabuke, um, Trey Hendrickson, um, and there's a couple other guys I'm probably forgetting, but those three guys are the guys that come to mind immediately. And I think the Steelers did a great job with this draft and a great job drafting guys that will revamp their offense as well as provide depth and possible starter potential for their defense. Um, so yeah, and that's all I got. Wow, another short episode. Would you look at that? Um, and that, like I said, that's it. I'm out. I'm done. Notes are done. If you guys want to let me know how you feel about your team's draft, how you feel about if I talked about your team in this draft, in this episode, let me know how you feel about the grades. But all in all, like I said at the top of this, if you agree with me, so be it. If you don't, so be it. Because at the end of the day, who cares anyway?